GEMA members, and welcome to our latest installment of GEMA Talks. Today, we have with us Elizabeth Luciano, who is the Senior Vice President of Consumer Marketing and Media at A+E Networks, which means she oversees marketing across all of the A+E properties, which includes A+E Network, includes Lifetime, includes History, all their platforms. They have some subscription video on demand platforms, and they do a lot in the digital space. So I'm thrilled to have her here today. So hello, Elizabeth, and hope you're doing well.
Hello, how are you? Hope you're doing well as well.
Yeah, we're hanging in. It's been quite a 9 months. One of the things I'm excited about today particularly is that you're one of our first, I think our first marketing people who've been on the GEMA Talks. I'm really thrilled to have you speak about the world of marketing, and particularly how it's changed over time. And you've now been in the business now for close to 15, 16 years. So you obviously have a great perspective on where the business has been and where it's going vis-a-vis marketing. I thought, if okay with you, I thought a great way to start today is to talk about how your career progressed. And sort of then we will end on your job today and then talk about that and a little bit about trends in the industry and where you're seeing the business going, and all of that would be great. But before we go back to your history, maybe you can just elaborate a little on what I said about like what your current role is at A+E today, and what does that really entail?
Sure. So my role today, currently I co-lead marketing at A+E Networks, and my focus is really on everything outside of creative. So that means I focus on who's going to watch our shows, what the message should be when we try to reach them, where we should go to advertise to them. I think about if they're not watching TV anymore, cable, most of you probably don't have a cable subscription, how we can get them across other platforms, what we should be thinking about in trends in that space. And so I like to say that I think about the consumer and their journey towards our content on all areas, outside of actually just making the creative or dreaming up the creative idea about how we'll pull them in. So it is a nice big world, and it is fascinating to get into every day because there's lots of changes going on.
Well, one of the things I'd imagine that makes the job particularly interesting is sort of the combo of brand and strategy, but then also very operational and tactical and execution focused, right? So you're thinking about what the History brand means and what does it stand for, but you're also thinking about what's the best way to advertise this new show we're launching, right? It's really that mix, right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating mix because, marketing operates differently depending on the business that you're in. And so if I had chosen to go into marketing and sell toothpaste, I would be the business. I would be giving that product the characteristics that set it apart in the marketplace. I would be driving, the sales and accountable for that. And to some degree in the entertainment space, I am doing that. But really, entertainment brands are built around the content that they make. And so my world is completely interwoven with, the world of the programmers who I work with every day. And so, you were right. One of the brands I work on is the History Channel. And so, with the History Channel, we have to think about not only how that brand is seen in the marketplace and what it stands for, but then also how we can get people in to watch our programming and shows. And also, if we want to go further afield than our name implies, what does that mean for our brand? Because a lot of the series that are popular on the History Channel are actually more just sort of male nonfiction, as opposed to, we do documentaries, but they're not on all the time. And so I am thinking a lot about, okay, how do we drive an overall narrative about this brand that people understand and can understand what to expect when they come to us. But then how do I sell this particular show and make sure that people know that it's from us and on us? Because long term, the viability of our business is based on the brand itself, right? That's what allows us to launch series, and that's what people connect with. So it is a really interesting balance between larger brand thinking and more tactical thinking, series by series and show by show. And it's especially interesting because I don't control what they greenlight in terms of shows. I can argue strenuously for or against, but ultimately it is not my decision.
Right. So you got to figure out what you have and how to best maximize it. So let's rewind back to those fun days at Georgetown. back in the day. So talk a little. So you were an English major, but talk about while you were at Georgetown. Was entertainment media something that you were thinking about for your future? Did you have any connections to that world, or like talk about what you were thinking about for your future career when you were thinking about, during the time you were going to be graduating?
Yeah, so you and I talked yesterday, and I was totally honest with you when I said I had no clue what I wanted to do when I went to Georgetown, when I was a junior at Georgetown, when I was a senior at Georgetown, and when I graduated from Georgetown. I just had no clue. I love reading. I still do. Loved books, loved literature, and quite frankly, also really loved history. And so all of those seemed like a natural place to study. I was in the college, so I was liberal arts, and I really, lived that to the fullest. I graduated as an English major, as a psych minor. I really wanted to take history, but I legitimately had not a clue as to what I wanted to do.
By the way,
yesterday.
just to interrupt quickly, I think it's important for our younger audience members, particularly ones still in school, that like it's okay to not know what you want to do. Especially I think even back then it was probably a little more normal. Now it's like there's such a pressure to feel like you have to know what you want to do with your life when you're 21, and obviously you're a great example of proving that you don't. But hopefully you agree with me on that when you talk to young people, that like don't feel stressed if you don't know what you want to do.
Yeah, I would say don't feel, it's hard not to, right? Like, one of the realities of my time at Georgetown is a lot of my roommates and girlfriends walked in the door, going to the business school, knowing that they wanted to go into business, knowing that they wanted to go into law. Like they all had this sort of clear-cut path in their minds, which they followed. And so, it felt very strange to me to graduate and sort of, I did all sorts of things. I worked for a woman who was a literary agent to authors, getting them into publishers, and I would screen all the manuscripts that came in. I worked for a man who was writing a book as his fact checker, and he was a former Time editor, and so he got me in to become a fact checker at Time, and so I covered the 2004 presidential election with Time magazine, which was incredibly fun, which I thought was the right path because, like I liked literature. I was an English major. Maybe that means I was supposed to write. And again, like that didn't really suit. I didn't really like it. And they couldn't believe it, right? Because it's incredibly hard to get in there. I was incredibly fortunate, but I went to my mentor there and said, like, I don't really like this. And she thought I was crazy. But through all of that, I kept just sort of following my gut. And so once I had gone to her and said, I just don't think I'm cut out to be here and a journalist, she sent me to the publishing side. I wasn't quite right for what they wanted over there, but they sent me over to a media agency, and I was put on the Discovery team, Discovery being, a stable of cable networks. And that was sort of fun. And then we won the HBO business, and I had a chance to work for HBO, and it was probably a lot different than it is today. But they only wanted big, buzzy, fun ideas, and it was the best. And so from there, I discovered what I wanted to do. I found a place to focus, and off I went. And, I think, like I was telling you yesterday, like, it took me a little while. I was joking. I was the black sheep of all of my friends. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. But I actually have stayed in the business, much longer than some of my other friends who've kind of changed careers at 30, 35, so sometimes it's okay to just take a little while to figure out where you want to go.
Yeah. So I think you were at the PhD agency. That's where you started. And then you moved to Wieden Kennedy, which is a very well-known agency. I know I think they had the Nike business, which kind of put them on the map. And how was that different than, and how was their philosophies different maybe than PhD or other places you had got to know?
Sure. I loved, Wieden has an incredible reputation, and they've remained an independent, full service advertising agency since day one. And you're right, they did cut their teeth on Nike. They still have the Nike business to some degree. They're Nike's with a lot of people, but they also, by the way, that is those annoying Bud Light ads from 2 years ago. That's them. You can thank them for those. So they're a really wonderful place to work. And whereas PhD had really been a lot about the science and analytics of the media business. And it was a wonderful place to start if you're going to work in media, because it really gave me an understanding of how the business part of television, radio, print, everything else, how that worked, which was completely valuable, and it remains really valuable throughout my career. Wieden is a lot more about the art and not the science. They believe in insights. They believe that consumers are attracted to a proposition, but that really it's the creativity of the message that's going to call them in. And so that was a wonderful balance to my previous experience, and something that I've always kept with me, and I think is really important, you know, as you work in media and entertainment, because there are things that draw people that you can't always like find from numbers and analytics. Like,
Yeah.
there are just things that are surprising. And so you need to kind of remember that, and also go with your gut, kind of understand what draws people in. And so I've always tried to keep that with me as I've gone forward as well. And it was truly an enjoyable, completely wild place. So had a great experience there.
And then, you know, what often happens in the agency world, or when you work in the agency world, is usually you're interested in going on the client side, or there's a natural progression to that. And was A&E a client of Wieden? Is that how you got into A&E?
No, I didn't end up getting into A&E through, you know, them being a client, although that a lot of times is the way that people get a foot in the door. Instead, I had worked with someone at PhD who had moved on to another agency and was working with A&E as their client. And the client on A&E actually happened to be kind of difficult and completely crazy, and they had trouble keeping people employed for her. And so, you know, I knew that I wanted to get over onto the client side of the business, because, you know, I think that agencies, if you're interested in marketing, agencies are actually an amazing place to start. They give you a lot of exposure to different areas of the business. They also, as you're coming out of college, are kind of like work world light, like they're a little like loosey goosey, you know, not too formal.
Yeah.
But they're crazy hours, and you only ever see one slice of the business. So I knew that I wanted to get to the client side, because I knew I wanted to affect a greater portion of the business overall, marketing, you know, what have you. And so when she called and told me that there was this position available, the only catch was that the client was kind of, you know, your boss is going to be totally crazy. I was sort of like, okay, well, I know I want to do this. This company at that time was, you know, doing really well, had a lot of hit series. And so I said, fine, I'll
Yeah.
take it. If they'll hire me, I'll go. And so that is how I landed at A&E. And, you know, I will say she was absolutely as crazy as advertised. She really liked to bully people and push them around. She probably wouldn't, well, she didn't make it to today's culture. But she was a great experience, because you're not going to always have fabulous people that you're working with, and understanding how to pitch ideas and sell things to them, or, you know, is as important as having a wonderful boss who teaches you a lot about leadership.
Right. No, that's a great lesson. That's true. So at A&E, so then you worked there for quite a while. I know you moved to CNBC for a bit, and then you came back to A&E after that. So talk a little bit about the career progression at A&E, and kind of how does the job change as you go up the ladder? Like, what are the skill sets required when you're more junior than versus, you know, in the role you have today? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, you know, when I started at A&E, I was a director of media. And really my job was about working with a media agency to put together campaigns around series and manage the day-to-day of the business. Meaning, like, if we were advertising a show called Bates Motel that we had, I would work with them to ensure that we were going to the right places, but then also that the creative delivered, that I knew how it had done. And so I really lived in execution and details day to day. You know, from there, I grew and took over social media, and then larger consumer marketing. And then I started to get, you know, more brands in my purview. And as I moved up, you know, I had to let go of the day-to-day details and think a little bit more about how to help people execute. And it became more about talking about what was getting in the way of getting something done, as well as like top line ideas and strategy that would help us be successful in the space.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with every kind of like new bit of business that I've, you know, come to oversee over time, I have to take another step out and away, you know, from the day to day and the details. And, you know, at this point, as you said, I oversee 3 brands and all platforms. And so I have leads that sit within the brand teams and sit within the, you know, platforms, work with the product people. And so I don't get to sit and be part of those teams. And I think one of the biggest things, you know, for me, as I've grown over time is ensuring that those people have the support and the runway that they need to do great work, that we're thinking about how we communicate to people, how we sell ideas to people. But over time, it's been tough for me because it's really fun to be part of like a core group. And like, as you go, you kind of have to like, let that go. You got to be kind of the person that sits on top. And sometimes I feel like
Lonely
I'm
at the
a
top.
hired agent. What were you saying?
Lonely at the top.
And I'm not even at the top, but yes, it is like, it gets a little bit lonelier as you go up. And, I also feel like sometimes as you go up, you do more of the problem solving and,
Right.
the creative thinking about how we handle problems, which sometimes also stinks because sometimes you just want to have fun and, be in that great part where you've like seen, and, you do, but,
Yeah.
so that's, I think, a little bit of the difference between being at the more junior level and then thinking about how to, rise up to the upper levels. And I will say a crucial part of it, and I cannot stress this enough, is helping people do their best that are on your team, like having super smart people, making sure that they feel the support, that they have, the information that they need. Like, I think that is the single most crucial thing in, in the business, that you need to kind of learn as you go, rise up.
What are some other because now you have a team of people that that you lead, so you really are a top manager at your company. What are some other philosophies you have about leading in addition to trying to help them do their best work? What are some other things you kind of believe in terms of culture and leadership?
Culture. So, we've worked hard at A&E to have a culture of, we call it a culture of kindness, which needs to be different than being nice, because kind is like being clear about what you need and expectations, which means you have to kind of have difficult conversations. And especially, we haven't talked about like the state of my business, but the state of my business is that it's in change, that the
Yeah.
main part of our business is declining. And there's a lot of really tough things that we have to address and think about. And so, for me, it's always having the courage, when I'm in a meeting, I'm like, oh God, I've got to bring up something super unpleasant. I just don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like speaking up and doing it in a way that's not emotional or anything else, just sort of, stating the facts. And so, I think that is super important in terms of culture, being transparent and being able to have difficult discussions. I also think, at least on our team, and this has been really important in COVID, it's about being human. So like trying to understand like all the stuff that people are dealing with. Rich, that I have 4 children, so like it's chaos here.
Yeah.
A lot of we joke that like my team is like all the maternity money for every year because we've had so many pregnancies. And so like, trying to understand families, trying to understand young people who feel isolated, like just trying to be really human with people, and helping to support them as well. So those have been pretty core and fundamental to my leadership. And then I think the last thing is just really listening and hearing people, because sometimes when you're busy and other things, like it's easy to just sort of say, do it. But trying to like hear out if there are problems or things that you should be thinking about as well, I think is super important.
How have you navigated, running a department during COVID and having, all work from home and the remote aspect of it? How have you found that? And are there some ways where it's actually some ways better? Are there ways that it's obviously not as ideal? Just curious your opinion on that.
In some ways, I think it's a little bit better. I mean, I work in the New York area, right? So part of my day was getting on a train and then going into the city and then getting on a train and coming home from the city. And so leaving the commute behind to like be able to, do things like exercise in the morning or like, see my kids for a couple more minutes, I think have been really wonderful. I think the flip side is that, my husband and I joke that we no longer work from home, we live at work. And so, I think that setting boundaries has been really tough. And I would not say that I have yet succeeded in that, but like working hard to maybe get there.
Yeah.
Managing a team, I think like, from what I've experienced, my team really has had the same thing happen, right? They live at work. They can't figure out how to separate. We're getting, people are saying I'm like about to burn out. So it's really trying to like help people get resources and skills, and encourage them to take a break, model the behavior you want to see, make sure that you're taking a break.
Yeah.
We also, we work in marketing. Marketing is a lot of extroverts. They need a lot of time, like chatting with people and doing whatever. And so, as a group, we spend a lot of time. We have all hands meetings with the entire group every other week. We do inspiration sessions where we bring in speakers because we can't go to conferences like we like to do. We've tried to get inventive there as well. And so I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's working. I think people are doing all right. And again, there are some great things about it, which is that you do get to be home and hang out a little bit more. It's just that there's not always the separation that you would love to see.
Yeah. Let's talk about the world of marketing today. Well, first, let's talk about maybe how it's changed over time and the role of a chief marketer and what, industry-wide, what are some of the key tenets of marketing? It seems like they maybe have changed. And, again, the cable network industry is going through some pretty transformational changes too. So it could be related to that too. But just generally speaking, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts of where you've seen marketing go over the last, 10 or 15 years.
Sure. So I would say that entertainment marketing has remained the same and totally changed at the same time. And in large part, you can kind of trace the origins of the change to the launch of Netflix, which has obviously totally shifted the paradigm in terms of how people consume entertainment in their homes. So entertainment marketers love bright, shiny objects and big, flashy ideas. And that is still absolutely true. That's what makes it so much fun to work in this industry. However, Netflix is a streaming property that's brought to you through, the digital space. And so the data that you have on how people watch what they're watching has become much more nuanced and complex. And so it's really shifted away from sort of tried and true tactics that entertainment marketers love, like I'm gonna bombard the radio in the 2 days before,
Right.
to a lot more nuanced analytical analysis of where you can capture people and how to get them. And so, the brands that are winning in the space right now really take the approach of both the big, bold, and buzzy, as well as the small and nuanced. And so, like a perfect case study of how how it's changed is what Disney Plus did to launch their product last year, which is they went both big and bold and buzzy, and then also incredibly targeted and tactical down to like the different sort of interest groups that they identified were going to come in because they had Star Wars and The Simpsons and, whatever else they
National
had.
Geographic.
Yes, exactly. And so, as a marketer over time, my job has shifted from just really coming up with amazing ideas and making sure that the executives knew that we were doing something really, fun, like we were sponsoring a NASCAR race or like, something else, because that's our audience, to, still doing that to a degree, but then also really having the backup and the analytics and the research to justify what we're doing. And so we made that shift about 2.5 to 3 years ago. And it really is a balance because, especially as I started working more and more with our digital platforms, they are so analytics based that sometimes I think they miss the idea that you need to capture people's imagination in order to get them to consume content. And so, balancing out that science and the art has become really interesting. And it's made, for me, it's made entertainment just so fantastic to work in again, because, you do have that balance and there is that constant challenge.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, for you, you should talk a little bit about some of the new platforms that your content is also showing up in, right? So obviously you have the cable channels, the tried and true cable channels, but I think part of the goal today, right, is to have your content live in other places as well. Talk a little bit about that and what that means.
Sure. So, what you see today is most of the major media companies are moving towards the streaming space and making bets that the consumer is going to watch on a streaming platform, a Disney Plus, a Hulu, a Peacock, HBO Max, et cetera, and and start to move away from the cable space. To the degree that they're successful has yet to be seen. I mean, you still have news, you have sports, you kind of have that aggregated entertainment package within cable, and so I don't think it's curtains just yet for the industry, but it is important. My company is in a really interesting place because we're kind of like a mid-sized company, right? We don't have the scale of a Viacom or a NBC or a Warner Media. But we do have a lot of content, and we do have really strong brand awareness and brand affinity. And so sort of sitting in the middle ground, what we've chosen to do is to launch smaller niche direct-to-consumer products. One is called Lifetime Movie Club, and they take the essence, the sort of the core of each brand, what they're known for, and they offer it on that platform. So we have Lifetime Movie Club, History Vault, which is focused entirely on history's documentaries that they've produced over time.
Those are subscription-based?
It's a subscription based. So if you want to shell out $3.99 a month, you can watch over 300 Lifetime movies. You can knock
all in like 2 nights.
I mean, you'd have a pretty dark view of the world if you decided to do that, but you definitely could if that is your thing. And so, History Vault is $4.99, and then we also launched, talk about a dark view of the world, A&E Crime Central. A&E, my other brand, is known for their crime and justice and procedural programming. And so they have a subscription service there. And so, remarkably, those services, even though they were not really marketed a lot up until this year, because there are some constraints our business has with the partners in the distribution space, they've done really well, and that is based on the strength of the brands that we've had over time. And so my job is to do customer acquisition on those platforms, which has been really interesting because that is incredibly data focused, but also incredibly focused on the experience and the needs once they sign up. Because if you're going to pay $4 every month, we need to make sure that you feel like you are getting top value for that $4. And that comes with, if you think about it, when you turn on Disney Plus or Netflix, like, how do you find content? How do you decide? How quickly are you deciding? All of those different types of things are incredibly important within the space. So that's one part. And then the other part is actually that, we're selling our content because we have so much of it and because it is so well known. And it's really helpful to those places like Peacock and like the new Discovery app that's coming out.
So you're selling content to third parties as well?
We are selling our content to third parties. And sometimes
that's a big change from the old.
So it's mostly just like we're a distribution service, right? Or a syndication service.
But it leverages, like you said, it's leveraging the power of the brands because people know those brands. And so you can have them live now in other places.
Yeah, and what these partners want also, they know the brands, but also there are certain series that are just incredibly popular and iconic, and they want to make sure that they have those. And I will tell you that it is a battle about, how much we can brand those series and other things, because they want them to be wholly owned, by their platforms. And we, of course, want the brand attribution and credit to make sure that the brands are strong and viable moving forward. So, that's a little bit of what we're thinking about and kind of what's going on in our world there.
Good. What are some of the key sort of skills or attributes that you think make a successful marketing executive? And obviously I would assume you have those. But what help the audience think about, in the chair you sit, what would some of those be that you think make you
I think
are important to possess?
I think one is a natural interest in the business that you're involved in. You can't really fake it. Once you get to a certain level, you have to kind of love and enjoy it. I think one of the biggest things is the ability to sell an idea or to clearly communicate what you're trying to do. I think initially when I started out, some of the most important things were the ability to manage details and execute. Right. And over time, my writing skills have come in more and more handy because it just feels like it's one constant pitch to everybody. Because, when you start out at lower levels, right, you're dealing with people who are within your business and know exactly what's going on. When you get to my level, almost nobody knows my business. And so I've got to think of the simplest way to educate them as to what I'm trying to do and get them to focus on core points. And so it's understanding on where people need to focus, understanding how to communicate with them, being able to listen to the problems and challenges they have. One of the unique pieces about my job is that I literally work with every single department in our company. And so, I have to understand their business, understand their challenges, and make sure that what I'm doing, addresses their challenges or helps mitigate their challenges if it's somebody like legal who's just like trying to help me, get an ad on the air or something.
Sure.
So those I think are some of the attributes that you need. Also, the ability, like just work ethic. I do think you don't have to work all the time, but you need to be sort of interested, dedicated, passionate. I think all of those are important.
Yeah. And particularly in media, there's just so much, there's just the constant, it's such a dynamic industry that you just have to be on top of it because it's moving so quickly.
I will say that is another thing. If you don't like living in chaos, I don't think the media industry is for you. Yeah. If you want like total structure and the same thing day after day, like right. No. If you like a good bit of crazy, this is the place for you. You do have to be a little bit fluid, flexible, able to reprioritize, not get frustrated by absurdity, like all of that kind of stuff, which is, I think, so ingrained in my day-to-day now that I don't even think about it, but it definitely is true. It is a wild and crazy place, and what makes it wonderful.
How much of your job at this stage of your career is research-based? How much of it is analyzing research, and how much of it is more the creative, imaginative part?
It's interesting. My boss says that every part of the company is creative. And so I do think that creative in the way where I'm thinking of ideas to bring an audience in is less than what it used to be. I probably do that maybe 10% of the time. And I think that 10%, my team wants me to get the heck out and stop suggesting ideas. I think creative problem solving, I would say, is like 75% of my day, and understanding, analytics, audience trends, that's a large part of my job. So like maybe 50% of my time is, well, not 50% of my time, but like, I do spend a lot of time making sure that I'm on top of that and representing that correctly. So that's the way I would say it kind of splits out.
Good. I'm going to ask you in a minute about some advice you have for some younger folks who are trying to break in. Before I do that, just kind of last point, anything you're working on now that you can talk about that you're excited about particularly, or is there a specific show or specific initiative that you want to share with the audience that you're like in the deep throes of right now?
Sure. I mean, I think, listen, I said that I loved history. Like I wanted to be a history major at Georgetown. And so I've always felt a kinship with the History Channel, and it always frustrated me that we didn't walk down more of the what I call core history path. And I think as the marketplace has become more and more challenged, that is actually, in fact, where we are turning back to. We are investing in docu-series. We're doing a big series around, we're calling it The Food That Built America. We're doing the machines, the toys, all these different topics. And it's not necessarily about the product itself, but about the business that launched, and oftentimes the rivalries that went into, like we've done one season of Food That Built America. It was pretty successful. And, they looked at things like Coke versus Pepsi. We're doing Domino's versus Pizza Hut. Like there's just really cool things with the brands that you see in everyday life and in history there that I think is really fun and exciting. And I think, with the history brand in general, we have been a very content-focused business to date, but with the importance of brand growing, we are focusing on how we can get out beyond just, TV series, what we call long-form content, and think about how we put podcasts into the market.
That seems like a really fertile area for you guys.
Yeah, so I think that's really cool and fun and exciting for me, because I think that's where we always should have been. The brand has, tremendous affinity. People really love it. And so it's going to be exciting to see how things do, that we work on producing in partnership with different elements of the entertainment space. Great.
So just to wrap up, so would love your thoughts on people listening in who either are at Georgetown now and trying to think about they're interested in media and entertainment or marketing specifically, or maybe they're junior in their career and trying to move up. What are some of the kind of Elizabeth pillars of to your thinking on that?
On how to do it?
Just advice. What's your advice to how to break in for some, especially now? It's given a pretty hard market right now.
I know. I think what I would say is like sometimes, and a lot of times actually, you know, Georgetown graduates, they come to me and ask this question, and my response is always pretty similar. In fact, because it's sort of the way that I did it, which is you may not end up where you want to be at first pass. And if you do, congratulations. You could also be like me and decide you didn't want to do it. But like, you know, I think a lot of times you have to be creative about how you get your foot in the door, and you have to take the opportunity that's available and make sure that you can do as much as possible in that space in order to take, you know, your next step. And so, you know, I think sometimes, like even when I was coming out of Georgetown, there were things that I didn't actually really want to work in advertising at first. I was like, ooh, like advertising, like, oh my gosh, nobody does that. Whereas, you know, that was one of the best experiences that I had because it gave me such a strong foundation in the business. I think you need to take the opportunity that's available, and then you need to chase down the next opportunity once you've kind of like built up your reputation, your resume, etc. I also think that it's really important to, you know, go out and be confident and chase down those opportunities, like never let anything kind of pass you by. And, you know, just have confidence in yourself and go and do that. And so I think, you know, those are really important as you try to break in. And I think especially today when the market is like a little bit like not great, being creative about the ways that you get in there and you try to get things done is even more important.
Do you have any specific advice about networking? Like if someone's trying to network and connect with you, are there certain, you know, do's and don'ts there that you would give advice on?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think networking, not only like in reaching out to people you don't know, but in staying connected to those that you've, you know, passed on your way over time is incredibly important. You know, you and I were talking yesterday, and I said, I was at Wyden probably 10 years ago now, and I still reach out to the people that I worked with on that account today, because some of them are still in the agency world, and those people are the people that really truly know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I think that's incredibly important. I think in terms of outreach and networking, one of the things I would say is persistence pays off. I remember when I got out of college, like if I reached out to somebody and they didn't get back to me, I was like, oh no, like they don't like me, I'm just going to quit.
Right.
Like I've got 4 kids. Most of the time I miss the first email. And so you need to follow up. Like there comes a time when it's like a little inappropriate and it's like stalking, but it's definitely not after the second or third email. Like
respectful persistence.
Yes, I think persistence is incredibly, incredibly important. And so that's what I would advocate for, you know, in terms of networking. And then just always having the conversation, even if there isn't anything available, just saying, can I talk to you? Can I understand what's going on?
Yeah.
And making sure, because most of the time people will say, well, I don't really have anything, but you can talk to my friend over here if you're interested in that. And then it just sort of like spirals. So it's super important. And I think the other thing that I will say, you know, is that sometimes it's easy to let networking go by the wayside. You know, especially as you kind of get older, you have a family, you get really busy. You have to sort of continue to push yourself to get out there and meet new people.
Especially that's an interesting point vis-a-vis COVID too, where it has been, in some ways it's easier because you can do a Zoom with people, but at the same time, we don't have all those natural places that we network with people, like conferences or having lunch. You know, in Hollywood, it's all about, you know, your breakfasts and your lunches, you know, and so that is, you know, I even think about for myself, like it has definitely been such a change in not having those natural pathways to keep the networking going. So I think it's a great point that, you know, push to do that. And that can just be it can just be a Zoom call, you know, and a catch up.
Yeah. I mean, I will say like, I probably spent the first 6 months of COVID being like, oh, it's so weird. Like, I don't want to hop on a Zoom with someone. I mean, of course, as a business entity, if I'm talking to a vendor or whatever, it's fine. But like just reaching out sort of ad hoc, I'm like, oh gosh. But finally, you know, you have to do it. This is the way we're communicating now. Eventually, hopefully we'll get back to doing breakfast and lunch because those are the best. But right now, this is it.
Absolutely. Well, Elizabeth, this has been great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the thinking, and I'm glad we're able to connect. And it's great to hear from a true blue marketer, because you've really been, that's been your whole career, and it's great to talk to someone who really has that perspective and can lend it to our audience. So thanks so much. Continue to stay safe. Things are getting a little more challenging again out there, virus-wise. So
most definitely, and it's been great to talk to you as well. So thank you so much for reaching out and doing this.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of the week.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.